survivors here today, Representative Jayapal asked a simple question, if he would be so kind and honorable as to turn around and face them and apologize to them for outing them. I mean, how many lives have been derailed because your department was either sloppy and incompetent or willfully trying to intimidate and punish these ladies coming forward?
The time of the gentleman has expired, and the gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin for 5 minutes.
Attorney General Bondi, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have spent the past several months attacking the administration for doing exactly what the American people wanted when they overwhelmingly elected Trump, securing our border and enforcing our immigration laws. I find it a bit ironic because this is the same party who just a few years ago were openly supporting strong immigration enforcement after witnessing criminal illegal aliens wreak havoc on the American communities. I have a short video I just wanted to play.
Immigrants. We're also a nation of laws. Undocumented workers broke our immigration laws, and I believe that they must be held accountable.
They committed a crime, deport them. No questions asked, they're gone.
No great nation can be in a position where they can't control their borders.
We need to address the issue of immigration and the challenge we have with undocumented people in our country. We certainly don't want any more coming in.
Every place in this country are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The job might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens.
Illegal immigration is wrong, plain and simple. When we use phrases like undocumented workers, we convey a message to the American people that their government is not serious about combating illegal immigration, which the American people overwhelmingly oppose. If you don't think it's illegal, you're not going to say it. I think it is illegal and wrong.
Open the borders, my God. You know, there's a lot of poverty in this world, and you're going to have people from all over the world, and I don't think that's something that we can do in this world, can't we?
Yes or no, would you allow those cities to ignore the federal law?
No.
We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked, and circumventing the line of people who are waiting patiently, diligently, and lawfully to become immigrants in this country.
So Attorney General Bondi, what's the Trump administration, DOJ, doing to end the open border policies of the prior administration that saw dangerous drugs and criminal aliens flood our communities?
Congressman, President Trump has worked tirelessly, as you know, to close our border, which is what the Democrats had asked for in that video. President Trump closed our borders on day one. He is protecting Americans. He is protecting our kids from the influx of drugs that were flowing into this country from Mexico. The fentanyl precursors that were coming from China. These precursors were taken from China into Mexico, and in Mexico they were mixed and freely taken right into our country, along with gang members, MS-13, TDA, freely coming into our cities around our country. Thanks to Joe Biden's open border policies. That has stopped under Donald Trump. It will no longer happen under this administration, and he is doing everything to keep Americans safe. And let me continue. When he was elected overwhelmingly by the American people, the majority of the American people wanted Donald Trump. One of the main reasons was border security and keeping Americans safe. And that's exactly what he did. And that's why today the other side sits here, they yell, they cut me off, they want to yell, they want to ask a question and don't want answers. because they want to distract from all the great things that this president and this administration working hand in hand, and that includes Secretary Noem, who has closed our borders, and Tom Homan, who has closed our borders to keep Americans safe. And they're trying to distract from that, and they're not going to do it because the American people are smarter than that, and they see through their theatrics.
Thank you. Just quickly, yesterday Senator Grassley reached out to my office to tell me that I was one of the 20 members that was now disclosed were under surveillance from Jack Smith. This brings up the question of non-disclosure orders and whether or not they should apply to members of Congress. But with my phone records being surveilled, as well as looks like 19 other members of Congress, just wondering how DOJ views that.
Time is, the gentleman's expired, the gentlelady can respond.
As I stated earlier, Congressman, anyone's records who were illegally obtained, Democrat or Republican, we will fight vigorously to stop that. Anything with Arctic frost, I can't discuss right now.
And isn't it true, Madam Attorney General, that the DOJ's changed their policy? You can't do that now. DOJ's not gonna go do that and ask the judge for an NDO.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. That in and of itself tells you why this, how wrong it was. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California.
Madam Attorney General, you acknowledged earlier to Mr. Johnson that President Trump was mentioned and the release countless times, you said, in the Epstein files. I just want to play a video, though, for you that I think speaks to the frustration that many of these victims have. At times, Trump's name appears in the files, so it could at least be 1,000 times. Is that right?
The number is a total misleading factor. We have not released anyone's name in the Epstein files that has not been credible.
Director, could it
We
at
have
least be 1,000
released
times?
every piece of legally permissible information.
Okay,
You can
so-
characterize the numbers however you want it.
Give me my time, Director. It sounds like if you don't know the number, it could at least be 1,000 times.
It's
What's
not.
the-
It's not.
Is it at least 500 times?
No,
Is it at least 100 times?
no.
Then what's the number?
I don't know the number.
I understand why the victims are frustrated, and the Attorney General acknowledged what Mr. Patel would not acknowledge, that it was way more than 1,000 times. But I want to move, Madam Attorney General, to weaponization of government. And yesterday it was reported that 6 members of Congress had indictments sought against him, and they were not returned by a grand jury. My colleagues have spoken about their frustration of being in subpoenas and having cell phone records combed through. Well, in 2017 and 2018, Adam Schiff and I had our cell phone records and email records combed through, not by you, but a different Department of Justice under the President. It was in retaliation for our role in the Russia interference campaign. An Inspector General report would find this improper and that the predicate for it was absurd. In 2020, after sitting on 2 committees that were a part of the President's first impeachment, an FBI agent leaked my cooperation in a national security case where my campaign was targeted. The President's FBI senior leadership authorized 2 statements to the press that said I was never suspected of wrongdoing and only helped the investigation. But that didn't stop the death threats or my GOP colleagues from referring me to an ethics investigation where Kevin McCarthy's chairman on the ethics committee would find the same thing as the FBI. Our current FBI director would then write a book called Government Gangsters and identify a long list of enemies. About a quarter of them have been either investigated or indicted. He listed me at the very top along with Adam Schiff, and during that same testimony refused to recuse himself when asked if he would recuse if any case came across his desk involving me or people on that list. Since that testimony, his department has put me under investigation with Senator Schiff for the nonsense mortgage fraud cases that we've seen. I get it. This is what the President does. I've priced it in. We have a bingo card at home that my kids have made of what will come next. I expected that the President would come after his enemies. But what I want to talk to you next is serious. And I did not expect this would happen. And I'd like your help on it. The President has inspired death threats against me and many sitting up here with me. In June 2025, an individual left 11 voicemails at my district office. On the voicemails, they said, get the message to him. I'm gonna hunt him down, that motherfucker, and toss his ass over the Golden Gate Bridge by my fucking self. Donald Trump's Department of Justice in the Northern District of California declined to prosecute. On May 14, 2025, on Twitter, responding to something I posted, the individual said, no, it wasn't Eric, and now I'm going to kill you.
the Department of Justice from the Southern District of Texas declined to prosecute. May through December of 2025, we received messages at my office that said, I hope somebody shoots you and your children and your wife in the head. Pew, pew, motherfucker, pew, pew. I would stay indoors as much as possible, and my children, unfortunately, have to do that. The Department of Justice has not charged this individual and cited that he's a prolific caller and has health conditions, although what we have found in our own investigation and his voicemails is that he has said he will employ others to do this. The president can come after me. It's fine. I'm in the arena. So are these folks. But we never expected that the Department of Justice would not seek to prosecute and investigate those who are making threats against us. And that would include those on that side of the aisle. And I'm just asking for your help to protect life, because life is at risk with the environment we're in right now.
Congressman, I completely agree with you. I know about several of those personally involving you. I believe one has been charged publicly, and there's something I would be happy to talk to you about off camera. But I can assure you that they are very serious. They are being looked into, and I can give you more details on those. None of you should be threatened, ever. None of your children should be threatened. None of your families should be threatened. And I will work with, you can come into my office any day. I will work with all of you on both sides of the aisle if you are ever threatened. And I'll gladly talk to you after this hearing about your cases. But I can tell you some of them are very active.
Appreciate that. Now yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and we're sorry for what the gentleman and his family had to go through. We appreciate what the Attorney General said. I think some of the things that the gentleman from California related, we can all relate to, and it's unfortunate, it's wrong, as the Attorney General said, and we appreciate the help we get from the Justice Department. With that, we will now recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Van Drew.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know where to begin. Thank you for being here, General. You might see me when I'm right in front of you. I have to mention this first. You know, I used this word before, and my friends on the other side of the aisle got mad at me, but hypocrisy. Epstein, Epstein, Epstein. But for years on the other side of the aisle, we heard nothing. Crickets, not a word. Nothing was said when they were in control. Nothing was mentioned basically the last summer, and the ranking member points out that he did do something last year. Yeah, he did a letter complaining about the plea deal for Maxwell, but it wasn't a big deal. Then we get a new administration, and all of a sudden it's a big deal, and they feign concern, they're upset, they're investigating. They had all these years and all this time. And in fact, Stacey Plaskett, and we all know that name, when they had a congressional hearing, Democratic member, were taking texts from Epstein on questions to ask to go after Trump. So Epstein was using her Democratic colleague as a tool to go after President Trump. Just everybody keep that in mind. And then we talk about ICE and how horrible it is, and there are concerns. Everybody wants everything to go right. Nobody ever wants to see somebody die, and they complain about it. But at the same time, hypocrisy, they encourage constituents to go after the ICE agents, to challenge them, to hurt them, to attack them. And that doesn't make sense. That's hypocrisy. And then we hear about the concern of, going after Democrats, that the legal system, that judiciary and Department of Justice is going after Democrats. But they literally rework the legal system under Alvin Bragg and Letitia James to go after Republicans and those sympathetic to Republicans. So, be careful when you accuse others that you're not guilty yourself. Be careful of what you say, because you got a history, and it's easy to go over it. I just want to talk about where we were and where we are now. We had over 10 million illegal crossings in the past between 2020 and 24. Over 10 million. There's probably a much bigger number. I'm being conservative. We were told the people weren't dangerous, but they were, General. They were dangerous, many of them. More than 300 individuals on the terror watch list during that time. Violent criminals came across, as we saw consequences, where mothers and fathers, children were raped, murdered, hurt, abused, beaten, trafficked, all from the drugs. My God, the drugs they brought into our babies in this country. 73,000 illegals with criminal histories. 20,000 with convictions of assault, robbery, and sex offenses. 13,000 convicted murderers in our beautiful offenders. It was madness. It was insanity. It's bizarre. It was madness. It was insanity. It's bizarre. It's perverse. What in God's name were you doing? So we finally are cleaning this up now. We're finally trying to make it right and safe for our people. So my questions are this. General, do you believe in removing criminal illegal aliens from our communities will save American lives?
Yes, and given the cases that you just discussed, that's proof of it every single day. President Trump is committed to that. This entire cabinet is committed to that and making and keeping Americans safe.
Thank you. Will you agree that, and thank you for doing that, will you agree that allowing individuals with known criminal histories to enter and remain in the United States, we knew this back then, they knew it. Would you agree that creates serious risks to our public safety? I know the answers, but let's just say them clearly.
Yes.
Would you agree that when dangerous individuals are released instead of detained, and they were released over and over and over again, and these are the real issues, this is really what America cares about. They want their children and their families to be safe. Do you think if you release them instead of detaining them, that crimes will happen because of that?
Absolutely.
Would you agree that, I'm sorry.
And it did.
And it did, thank you. Would you agree that cooperation between, and this is a biggie, and I'm gonna ask you to elaborate on this. This is a big deal. This is why some of the problems we're seeing in some of the places like Minnesota are happening. That cooperation between federal and local enforcement, which we always used to have, helps remove violent offenders from our communities, that we should be a team.
Yes.
And can you elaborate on that a little bit? In other words, when the local enforcement is forced by the politicians, not their fault, not to do their job and not cooperate, why does it create the situations that we see where we have the need for crowd control? By the way, they're not peaceful. Those are not peaceful protesters. We know what a peaceful protester is. When you spit on law enforcement, when you push them, when you hit them, when you beat their car, if you can answer the question, thank you.
Well, time's expired. You may answer the question.
Thank you. Yes, I spent 4 days myself in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. What I will say about some of these sanctuary cities, some of these democratic cities, law enforcement, they quietly want to work with us. I've spoken to law enforcement in multiple cities who want to work with us. And yes, we're gonna do everything we can to keep our citizens safe, whether or not these Democrat-controlled sanctuary cities do or don't.
And damn it, that's what really matters. I yield back.
Mr. Chair, I have a UC.
Ms. Crockett from Texas is recognized for UC.
Thank you so much. Donald Trump's approval rating implodes on his strongest issue. This is from Newsweek today. It says 40% of people approve of Trump's handling of immigration and border security, while 60% disapprove.
Without objection,
That is a net
admitted.
drop.
Now I recognize the
Negative
gentleman
20.
from California, Mr. Liu.
Thank you, Attorney General Bondi, for being here today. I'm going to show you two photos.
Thank you.
I'm going to show you two photos of former Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew attended various parties with Jeffrey Epstein. Under the law Congress passed, you were allowed to redact photos to protect the victims of Epstein's sex trafficking operation. You redacted the photos of this victim's face because you were following the congressional law. Is that correct?
I'm sorry that we redacted the victims.
Because you're following the congressional law, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You have now established that please put the photos back up, and we are looking at a sex trafficking victim. Under the Federal Victims Trafficking Protection Act, not only is Jeffrey Epstein guilty, but anyone who patronizes Epstein's sex operation is also guilty of a crime. That's why I find it absolutely despicable that you sought to protect Epstein's clients, like former Prince Andrew. Last July, you closed the case on Epstein's abusers. The July 2025 memo from your Department of Justice stated, quote, "We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. These two photos, please put the photos back up. These two photos staring you in the face are evidence of a crime and more than enough evidence to predicate an investigation against former Prince Andrew. So I ask you, Attorney General Pam Bondi, why did you shut down this investigation last July, and why have you not prosecuted former Prince Andrew?
I don't believe you asked Merrick Garland these questions when he was Attorney General and set before.
I agree with you.
You
I've been
twice.
claiming that time. I agree with you. I agree with you. During the Biden administration, I called for people looking at Epstein files. Merrick Garland dropped the ball, as did Attorney General Bill Barr, as did Alex Acosta, a whole string of failures. But you are in charge. You have the power to change things, to hold these men accountable, and you're doing the opposite. You're protecting them. So I want to move on to another man.
Can I answer
Donald
that?
Trump. I want to move on to another
Can I answer
question.
your question about protecting?
You answered the question.
You're saying no. I love this.
I want to discuss another man, Donald Trump, who is all over the Epstein files, like former Prince. Here's the video. Like former Prince Andrew, Donald Trump attended various parties with Jeffrey Epstein. I want to know, were there any underage girls at that party or at any party that Trump attended with Jeffrey Epstein?
This is so ridiculous, and that they are trying to deflect from all the great things Donald Trump has done. There is no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime. Everyone knows that. This has been the most transparent presidency. He's the one that asked that those five.
My time. I got your answer. You said there's no evidence.
Trump asked
Chairman, please stop the clock.
sign
The clock.
the legislation. This is
Time.
I'd like to
ridiculous.
my time.
Belongs to the gentleman from California.
Okay. I'm gonna put up another document from a witness who called the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, because I believe you just lied under oath. There is ample evidence in the Epstein file.
Don't you ever accuse me of a crime.
I believe you just lied under oath, and this is on videotape. You said there's no evidence of crime. I'm showing you, here is a witness statement who called into the FBI's Threat Operations Center. He drove Donald Trump around in a limo. He overheard what Donald Trump said to Jeffrey on his cell phone. He was so angry, he was gonna stop the limo and hurt Donald Trump. And he met a girl who said she was raped by Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. She later had her head blown off, and officers at the scene said that could not have been suicide. No one at the Department of Justice interviewed this witness. You need to interview this witness immediately. Epstein should rot in hell, so should the men who patronized his operation. And as we sit here today, there are over 1,000 sex trafficking victims, and you have not held a single man accountable. Shame on you. If you had any decency, you would resign right after this hearing concludes.
The gentleman has expired.
May I respond?
Yeah, I don't know how you respond. No one can.
I did not ask a question, but
He doesn't
you're
want
allowed
to talk
to.
about
I did not ask
the
a question.
crime in California. He does not want to talk about
I did not ask a
crime
question.
in his
She
state.
can't just ask this. I did not ask a question.
Meeting will be in order. The gentleman has yielded back his time. I think our next witness will be more than happy to let the Attorney General.
Madam Attorney General, would you like to?
Gentleman from Alabama is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yeah, you have a few minutes.
Thank you, Congressman. This is what Congressman Liu didn't want to talk about. He didn't want to talk about all the crime that is happening in his state. California refuses to honor detainees because of its dangerous sanctuary city policies. The refusal means California has released 4,561 criminal illegal aliens onto the street. The crimes of these aliens include 31 homicides, 661 assaults, 574 burglaries, 184 robberies, 1,489 dangerous drug offenses, 379 weapons offenses, and 234 sexual predator offenses. That's why they are deflecting. That's why they're trying to talk about the Epstein files. That's currently happening in his home state.
Attorney General, thank you for being here, and I wanted to make sure you had time to respond. I'm going to change gears a little bit. In October, when you were testifying before the Senate, I know you and my friend Senator Katie Britt discussed concerns of infiltration of the illegal Chinese vapes into our country. As a father of three, obviously, I'm worried a little bit about this, and I believe that many parents in the country share our similar concerns. Can you provide an update on DOJ's work in this space over the past few months?
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up. We're talking about the vapes. And this should be an issue where both sides of the aisle can work together on. Parents need to understand, children need to understand that so many of these are being manufactured in China, sent to our country, and have the potential to be laced with lethal drugs. We've seen an overdose. We need to get on the front end of this before we have another crisis and children are dying. I've partnered with Secretary Kennedy, of course, at HHS on this matter, but thank you for bringing it up. You know, they're selling these things as flavored vapes illegally in many stores around the country. Secretary Kennedy and I actually we went and did something on this, and it was sadly the day that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And so it didn't get a lot of attention, nor should it have after that happened. But yes, we're continuing to work on that, and thank you for bringing that up. That's happening in all of our states, and I would ask everyone here, I know Congresswoman Ross was just nodding, it's happening in every state. And not only are they laced with THC, many of these vapes, but they could be laced with fentanyl. We have had a child, I wish I could think of the state it was in, but we have already had someone overdose. And we have to get together on this, and we have to get on the front end of this. And I would love to work across the aisle on this to protect our kids. How many school kids do you see now vaping? And it's not only, I believe a vape has 20 cigarettes, but you know, that's one vape is 20 cigarettes, I believe it is, but also what they could be laced with, because so many of them, the majority of them, are manufactured in China.
Sure, and if you need additional resources, please let us know as you're going through the process. And I'm going to change gears one more time on you. Under the Biden administration, there was a lot of confusion created when parts of the DOJ began treating software developers like financial institutions. Even when they did not hold or control anyone's money, they were simply building the technology. That uncertainty made it harder for Americans to build, innovate here at home. Earlier this year, the Deputy Attorney General issued a memo entitled Ending Regulations by Prosecution, a clear break from the Biden administration's approach, and I think it's important that that's a good step in the right direction. But can you talk a bit about how the DOJ is now putting that memo into practice, especially when it comes to making sure that people are just writing the software and don't control the user's funds, we don't want them treated as an unlicensed money, or they're not money transmitters. So.
Yes, and we're doing everything we can to protect the American people on that, and I would refer everyone to Deputy Attorney General Blanche's memo, and we're working as hard as we can on that topic.
So we want to lead the way in the space on that, so we appreciate the help. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back 10 seconds.
Gentleman yields back. Recognize Jump for Arizona for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a number of UCs.
Gentleman can proceed.
Thank you. Bombshell new docs show Trump called police about Epstein in 2006.
Objection.
Kamala Harris defends Biden administration decision not to release Epstein files.
Objection.
Why weren't they released during the Biden administration?
Objection.
House Democrat Stacey Plaskett exchanged texts with Epstein during 2019 congressional hearing.
Objection.
New York judge allows Epstein victims' claims against Plaskett to proceed.
Objection.
Hakeem Jeffries solicited funding from Epstein in 2013 after financier was convicted child sex offender.
Objection.
Jeffrey Epstein was invited to Dim fundraising dinner and to get to know Hakeem Jeffries by a firm working with Brooklyn's Barack.
Objection.
An email from Leslie Groff to Jeffrey Epstein concerning Hakeem Jeffries fundraising. Epstein file says Biden was replaced in 2019, question mark?
Objection.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields, back. The gentleman from California is recognized, Mr. Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Ms. A.G. Bondi. I agree with you. Our top priority should be protecting Americans. In my past life in the California State Legislature, I did a lot of work on solving sex crimes, passing legislation to update our codes. And I found that the biggest challenge to solving sex crimes is reporting them. Victims have to have the guts to stand up, to report those sex crimes. But it's not easy. It's the most unreported sex crime there is. Crime there is sex crimes. It's painful, humiliating. A lot of times the victims don't think anything's gonna come out of their reporting these crimes. Then we have adults who as children were molested, boys and girls, who will live in silence for the rest of their life. I believe the Epstein files are just one of many sex rings, sex crimes taking place in our society today. I hear 1,200 Epstein victims, some additional victims as young as 9 to 10 years old. The challenge I have today, what bothers me today about this hearing, Madam AG, is what's the message we're sending out there on Main Street? Shouldn't ask a question I don't know an answer to, but I'm going to ask the victims behind you right now. First, can you please stand up? And then, can you please raise your hand if you think after everything you've heard today, you feel that our AG defense have your back? Do we have your back? Raise your hand if you're confident that we got your back. And that's the issue, Madam AG. We've got to make sure that victims stand up and report the crimes. Otherwise, we're going to be taking a step backwards. Today, AI, cyber, social media, the new realm for people to be hurt, attacked sexually. These are the areas I welcome the opportunity to work with you on. It's not your problem, it's not my problem, it's our problem. But to have redacted files that are not showing us the names of these predators is wrong. These are very powerful people. This was a very expensive business, and we don't know who they are. I would imagine they're very prominent Republicans, very Republican Democrats, and we are covering up for them. We gotta know what's going on out there, Madam AG. It looks like you want to say something. I'm going to give the opportunity to address my statement.
I look forward to working with you on any crimes involving child sex predators, children, and also cyber crimes. That is a tremendous problem now throughout our country. AI, you are correct. AI is causing great problems online we're working on that though. AI is an incredible tool, but it also can be fraught with peril with victims of crime. I've experienced that with someone I know who we've been trying to help. I look forward though to working with you on that and on cyber crimes. Can I?
Please, go ahead.
And as I said before, to any victims, we ask them to come forward to our office and we want to work with them. I have never not worked with a victim, and I believe I've actually spoken to several of
Madam, if I can reclaim my time, only have a minute.
Behind me.
I can reclaim my time. I just think we start out by making sure those redactions are unredacted, those Epstein files, to make sure that the public, according to the law, following the law, that those names in those files are made public. We have to make sure we tell those predators there is no place for them to hide, and if they commit the crime, they're going to fry for it. It starts with showing us the names of the perpetrators in the Epstein files.
May I respond to that?
Sure.
Okay. So, if any man's name was redacted that should not have been, we will, of course, unredact it. If a victim's name was unredacted, please bring it to us and we will redact it. We were given 30 days to review and redact and unredact millions of pages of documents. Our error rate is very low,
The
but there are
victims are
always
right behind you. You've
errors
got to
on
convince them
both sides.
that we're doing a good job
Everything
of
we can to help
protecting
the
them.
victims. We will
Thank
do
you,
everything
Mr.
we can.
Chair.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California, Mr. Kyle, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Madam Attorney General. I wanted to return to a point that the chairman raised at the beginning of this hearing, which is these jurisdictions that refuse to honor detainer requests from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, often called sanctuary jurisdictions. Now, I know that you are not involved directly in immigration operations per se, but you do deal with the legal issues surrounding these jurisdictions. So let's say we have someone who's here illegally, who has committed a crime that, like the thousands of people you mentioned in California, murderers, sexual predators, drug traffickers. If that individual is in detention in a jurisdiction that has a sanctuary policy where they do not honor ICE detainers versus in any other jurisdiction where they do, how does the nature of apprehending that person, how does the nature of ICE's involvement in that operation differ in those two circumstances?
Well, I believe you've seen that in Minnesota, where people were not cooperating with us. I believe a lot of local law enforcement did want to cooperate, but we are doing everything in our power to arrest and deport illegal criminal aliens, and that is not going to stop under Donald Trump's administration. You know, why sanctuary cities are so dangerous, what we've seen in Minneapolis. Where do all the criminals go? The gangs, TDA, MS-13. Where are they going to go? They're going to go to a sanctuary jurisdiction because they believe they're protected, and that's not fair to the citizens of those cities.
Yeah, and this is a point that there at least used to be a lot of consensus on. The idea that, you know, it's better to do a handoff to the immigration authorities in a custodial setting rather than releasing them where they have to be apprehended in the community. This is Alejandro Mayorkas when he was before this committee, not exactly a paragon of border security, but he said, "I do not consider it in the service of public safety to release an individual into the community when that individual can be released to Immigration and Customs Enforcement for prompt removal." Now, his words are one thing, his actions are another. But when you have jurisdictions across the country, including my state of California, doing systematically precisely the thing that even Alejandro Mayorkas said threatens public safety, I mean, what does that say to you?
It's a danger to the citizens of your community, and thank you for fighting to protect them.
Absolutely, and you know, we're having this conversation right now in relation to Homeland Security funding. And I believe there are some common sense reforms that have been proposed that folks on both sides would agree make sense, but those reforms have to go hand in hand with reforming this reckless practice of refusing to cooperate, refusing to honor detainers, and declaring oneself to be a sanctuary. So I'm hoping that we can find bipartisan support for what has long been a bipartisan principle. I want to go to a second topic, which is the school board memo, which I know that you have rescinded, and it was initially promulgated by Attorney General Garland when he came into office with President Biden, essentially opening an investigation into parents who were showing up at school board meetings and expressing their views on COVID policies, masks, various other issues, and using the full apparatus of federal law enforcement and counterterrorism to go after these parents. Now, he said this was because there was an increase of threats, but when even his own FBI director, Christopher Wray, was before this committee, he said there was no evidence of an increase in threats. Yet nevertheless, when I asked him if he regretted the memo, Attorney General Garland said there was absolutely nothing wrong with the memo. Now, I take it you disagree with that, having now rescinded it?
Absolutely. That was one of the main focuses of President Trump and this administration. We will protect parents at school boards. We will protect children in schools. We will protect parents' rights for their children's education in our school system in this country. We will protect Christians. We will protect everyone who wants to freely protest. If Christians want to protest in front of an abortion clinic without being arrested, they will do so.
Thank you very much. And finally, I thank you for your efforts to step up the detection and rooting out of fraud. My home state is California. Any idea if there might be any fraud going on in California?
Well, we are establishing, as you have heard, a fraud unit, and I'm sorry you're having to deal with that in your state, but the cavalry's coming. And we have Colin McDonald, who is hopefully will be confirmed soon. We're working on Minneapolis. I don't know if you were sitting here when I said that, but California was right up there. I'm sorry to say for both sides of the aisle, but California is right up there with fraud. It's out of control, but we are coming to your rescue. Donald Trump is coming to the rescue.
Thank you very much. And unfortunately, I think you'll find that what's happening in California pales in comparison to what's been going on in Minnesota. Thank you. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Actually, I think the gentlelady from Pennsylvania.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, I'm here. On September 25th, President Trump signed a memorandum known as NSPM 7, purporting to address domestic terrorism. But Americans across the political spectrum were immediately alarmed by the memo's blurring of the line between unlawful conduct and constitutionally protected speech and activity, as well as its call to investigate, prosecute, and dismantle groups that the president described without evidence as, quote, an organized campaign of radical left terrorism. Now, counterterrorism experts were further alarmed by the administration's singular focus on left-wing extremism, combined with the sudden deletion from the DOJ website of decades of research and law enforcement analysis, which had concluded that right-wing extremism poses the greatest terrorism threat to Americans. The president's memo broadly and vaguely links violent conduct to ideologies, and it targeted specifically anti-American, anti-Christian, and anti-capitalist beliefs, as well as, quote, hostility to so-called traditional American views on family, religion, and morality, end quote. President Trump has repeatedly and openly, however falsely, tried to brand his political opponents with these sentiments listed in his memo. But as you know, as a lawyer, holding beliefs that the White House disagrees with is not a crime. And the statute defining domestic terrorism requires criminal acts, not just thoughts and ideas. That's why legal experts, nonprofit leaders, religious freedom, and civil rights advocates immediately raised the alarm that the new presidential directive was a politically motivated attack on civil society designed to silence who disagree with the administration. So, Ms. Bondi, Section 3 of that memo directed you, as Attorney General, to submit to the President and Stephen Miller a list of groups or entities whose members are engaged in acts that meet the definition of domestic terrorism. And then on December 4th, you directed the FBI to work with a variety of law enforcement entities to compile a list of groups and entities engaged in such acts by January 3rd, 2026, and to update that report every 30 days thereafter. So can we assume that you or persons under your direction at the Department of Justice have prepared that list of groups or entities who are designated as domestic terrorist organizations? And I just remind you that's a yes or no question. Did you prepare
I'm not
the
going to
list?
answer it yes or no, but what I will say is I know Antifa is part of that. I will talk to you about
I'm
that.
reclaiming
And on
my time.
February
I
5th,
asked
2025,
you
an
prepared
Antifa member
a
was
list.
arrested in Minneapolis
I'm
for report
reclaiming
for
my
spinal
time.
hierarchy.
Did you
They
have
ask a
a
question and
list?
don't want an answer.
The answer is yes or no.
Time belongs to the gentleman from Pennsylvania. Gentleman can proceed.
Okay, so will you commit to providing this committee with any list of organizations that you have recommended be designated as domestic terrorist organizations?
We will comply with the law in all matters.
Will you commit to provide this committee with your list of entities that you recommend be designated as domestic terrorist organizations?
I'm not going to commit to anything to you because you won't let me answer questions.
Okay, well then, we do understand that your current position is that you have a secret list of people or groups that you are accusing of domestic terrorism, but you won't share it with Congress. And I'd remind you that when the US government designates an entity as a foreign terrorist organization, it must report that to Congress and to the entity, because the government can make a mistake and the entity has the opportunity to contest it. So Your position seems to be that if you falsely designate an American or an American organization as a terrorist group, there's nothing they can do about it. I think we get it. You don't want to answer the
No,
question.
you don't get anything regarding public safety.
Thank you.
Nothing.
Thank you for the insult. It's clear you didn't come to Congress prepared to answer questions that the American people have every right to have answered, but if you were to prepared to answer truthfully, here's what we expect the facts to show. The administration is keeping lists of Americans who the White House says are engaged in domestic terrorism. Those lists could include Americans who have not committed any acts of terrorism, but simply disagree with this administration, people like Renee Good and Alex Preddy. And your list may include clergy, elected officials, and members of indivisible groups across the country. And those lists likely don't include Proud Boys or Oath Keepers who were actually convicted. Americans have never tolerated political demagogues who use the government to punish people on an enemies list. It brought down McCarthy, it brought down Nixon, and it will bring down this administration as well.
You're right.
I yield back.
That's why we're so glad they rescinded the
That's right.
memorandum targeting parents. For goodness sake, as the gentleman from California just pointed out in his 5 minutes, the gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
May I respond very briefly to her statement?
I think we can do that
Okay.
probably on one of our members.
Okay, thank you. I don't want that to get away. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Behind me, I have 3 documents from the DOJ production that are emblematic of the massive failure of the DOJ to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. To my right is an email that was sent by the victim's lawyers to the DOJ. It was a list of names not to redact, a list of names not to release. What did the DOJ do with this email? They released this email in the document production. Literally the worst thing you could do to the survivors, you did. And they're getting phone calls. A lot of these people didn't want to be known. And we know you touched the document because you redacted one name and you redacted the lawyer's name, but you left the survivor's name there. The next document I want to show you, that was in the title, the victims' survivors' names, all right? The title of this one is Child Sex Trafficking. Co-conspirators, fully redacted. And by the way, we don't redact them here. Les Wexner is in this. Now your deputy attorney general said, oh, well, he appears hundreds of times in the files. But he doesn't appear in this file until I forced you to release it, where he's listed as a co-conspirator, not to tax evasion, but to child sex trafficking, not to prostitution, not to money laundering, child sex trafficking. And then finally, what we have here is the third exhibit that I have is emblematic of the FD 302 release. These are the documents that we need that you're holding on to and over redacting because they have the names of the men who are implicated. How do we know? Because the survivors gave testimony to the FBI, and it's in there. And what happens when you go to the portal at the DOJ to look at what's behind this redaction? Another redaction. So we can't even see them. And then there's some of these files you pulled down from the website that we will never see because we can't search the redactions. So I have several questions for you. Who's responsible? Are you able to track who in your organization made this massive failure and released the victims' names? Are you able to track who it was that obscured Les Wexner's name as a co-conspirator in an FBI document? Do you have that kind of accountability?
I believe Wexner's name was listed more than 4,000 times.
Yeah, I already told you that. This is where he's listed as a
Can I
co-conspirator.
finish my answer? Come on, let me finish my answer. We corrected that within 40 minutes. He was already, you're acting like everybody's trying to cover up Wexner's name.
Reclaiming my time.
I'm gonna answer this question.
Reclaiming my time.
He was,
Mr. Chairman.
how this works.
Can I have my time
He
back?
was,
Mr. Chairman.
The gentlelady can give her answer. The time belongs to the gentleman from.
All right, I'm reclaiming my
Can I give
time.
my answer?
So I'm going to put the language of the bill up on the screen.
Chairman, may I
have
give my
another
answer
question.
on that?
If
It's a political
the question.
joke, and I need to give my answer
Yeah,
on that.
we'll let the Attorney General respond, and then the gentleman can move to the
Chairman,
next
it's
question.
my time.
Within 40
Chairman.
minutes, you asked me a question.
You
Within
didn't.
40 minutes, Wexner's name was added back.
Within 40 minutes of me catching you red-handed.
Red-handed, there was one redaction out
Where
of
he's
over
listed as a
4,700.
co-conspirator.
And
Okay.
we invited
what?
you
Excuse me,
in.
gentlemen.
This guy has Trump derangement syndrome. He needs to, you're a failed politician.
Gentlemen,
You need
I
to
want you to watch the
matter.
Chairman, please restore his time and remind the witness of the
Himself,
rules
there
here.
is no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals.
Is that your position as well?
My position is any victim who comes forward, of course, we would love to hear from them. 1-800-CALL-FBI. Did you ask Merrick Garland that the last 4 years? Did you talk about Epstein?
I'm reclaiming
at all
my
the
time.
last
I'm
4
glad you're
years?
asking about Merrick Garland.
You don't get to reclaim
because
time
this
when
is
you don't,
bigger than
when
Watergate.
I don't answer
This
questions the way you
goes
want.
over 4 administrations. You don't have to go back to Biden. Let's go back to Obama. Let's go back to George Bush. This cover-up spans decades, and you are responsible for this portion of it.
And that's
Now,
where the
I want to know, at what point did the FBI and the DOJ decide that Lex Wessner was not a co-conspirator? Because our Epstein Files Transparency Act requires you, please put it back on the screen, please, to release the internal decision about whether to prosecute him or not, and it's not in the files, and it's not in the files for any of these other men.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
When she answered,
And he's a hypocrite because he voted against the ban that we were talking about on deep fake AI porn. Only 2 people voted against it, and you were one of them, hypocrite.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Mr.
yeah,
Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, could she answer the question?
Chairman, I was wondering, the gentlelady's allowed, the Attorney General is allowed to respond the way she wants to respond to any member's questions, Republican, Democrat.
All right, I have unanimous consent request.
Gentleman's recognized for a UC.
All right, this is an example. I'm submitting these 302 forms that are entirely redacted. Even when you go to look at them.
Without objection.
I'm submitting a witness statement that implicates Les Wexner.
Without objection.
I'm submitting an article from the New York Times. The DOJ released nude photos and identifiable pictures of the victims. I'm submitting a letter from A.G. Barney to Kash Patel, imploring him to quit keeping the files when you found out that they were keeping files from you, because they're still redacting files that you.
Chairman, are we going to recess for votes?
Yes, we are.
I'm submitting for unanimous consent a document of 17 individuals who've resigned because of the Epstein files.
Without objection. Just want to check in how much time I have left in votes, but one thing I've learned here of late that they'll wait on this. How much time do we have? Oh, they just called, okay. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Maryland.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start by saying I appreciate what you said, Attorney General Bondi, and you said it to me personally, that you take the personal security of every member of Congress seriously and that people can contact you about that. And in these times, that's a very serious matter, so I thank you for that. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 7 of the Constitution is the Domestic Emoluments Clause. And it says that the president is limited to his salary in office and cannot receive any other money from the federal government while he's in office. It cannot be increased by $1. This president is the first president in U.S. history who has repeatedly sued the federal government for $230 million for the judicial search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, which was perfectly lawful and was never struck down. But now he's suing the IRS for $10 billion. He's suing the IRS for $10 billion, which I think is around 80% of its annual budget, because his tax returns were leaked, and they were illegally leaked by a private contractor who actually is in prison now, Charles Littlejohn, but he wants $10 billion. Now, Well, I want to ask you the question of whether you think it would violate the domestic emoluments clause for you to settle that $10 billion case or any of the other claims that the president has made against the government. He himself has remarked, it's interesting because I'm the one that makes the deal, right? And he says, I kind of have to work it out with myself. Do you think it would violate the domestic emoluments clause for the president to work out a deal from people who are his subordinates under his unitary executive theory to get money in one of these cases?
I'm not going to discuss pending litigation.
Okay, so theoretically you're saying because his privacy rights were violated in that tax case, and they were. I'm with the president on that. I mean, his Mar-a-Lago thing is ridiculous, but there's no doubt that his tax returns, despite the fact that he promised to release them, despite the fact that every other president released the tax returns, he suffered embarrassment when it showed that he hadn't paid taxes for several years, and he had a right for that not to happen. Now, I want to turn back to the Epstein survivors, because President Trump may have been a little bit embarrassed by the release of those tax returns. How much do you think the claims of these survivors are worth? As the good congressman from Kentucky just pointed out, there were lots of survivors who had decided, for reasons of their own, never to release their names. That determination was represented to people in Congress, and we built it into our federal law that their names could not be released, and yet you published their names, their phone numbers, their addresses, personally identifying information. If Donald Trump can get $10 billion theoretically from the Department of Justice, how much should these people get for a far worse violation of their privacy rights and a far greater danger established to them in their lives?
Do you even know who Chase Mulligan is? You're so obsessed with, you don't, do you?
I'm going to teach you the rules again. You're the Attorney General of the United States. We have rules here.
You're obsessed with him.
You're the Attorney General of the United States.
You're
The rules.
obsessed with Donald Trump. You have Trump derangement syndrome.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like my time restored. I'd like my time restored.
In your district. In your district, and you don't even know about it, about keeping children safe from online predators.
Time belongs to the gentleman from Maryland. Gentleman can proceed.
Yeah, and I want the whole country to look at this. Because this is the Attorney General of the United States, whose job is law enforcement. We've never had a witness who has misunderstood our rules and been unable to conform his or her conduct to our rules before. We have only 5 minutes, and so we use our time to ask you specific questions.
How long are you giving me to
Excuse me, I'm not yielding to you right now. I'd like that second restored too. So, Ms. Bondi, the way it works is we ask you a question, and you answer it, and if you go off on a wild goose chase, another tangent, you start reading statistics, or you start talking about stuff going on in our district, and by the way, I invite you to my district, come to my district, but that's not what we're here to do today, okay? So, and you do that, then we're allowed to say we reclaim our time. At that point, you have to be quiet. You have no choice. You have to be quiet. So, I hope you understand the rule of this one. Now, here's what I want to ask you. You're law enforcement. We've seen all kinds of evidence of crimes. And when we go over to the Department of Justice for the 4 computers for every member of Congress, we see more evidence of crimes. Will you create a joint task force of the Department of Justice and governors and state attorney generals and district attorneys across the country to investigate the crimes that have taken place against these victims and more than 1,000 like them? The DOJ is not doing its job. Will you create a task force with state and local law enforcement to make that happen?
Gentleman can respond. She wants to.
Thank you, Chairman. He called Chase Mulligan a wild goose chase and didn't even know who he was. He is a defendant in your own district who preyed on girls.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, you know what? If he were part of the Epstein investigation, you wouldn't do anything about it.
Online chat rooms and committed sextortion. Yet he didn't even know your tiny little district who he was.
Chairman, she's embarrassing you.
He's about to be.
This is your committee, and she is embarrassing you.
you.
Time of the gentleman has expired. I would remind the committee that last Congress, Secretary Mayorkas was here numerous times, and he wouldn't answer our questions, even when we sent them to him ahead of time in writing. So that's what we've had to deal with. I think the Attorney General is doing just fine. We have votes shortly. I will go to the gentleman from Virginia, and then we will take a break to head to the floor.
I thank the chairman, Attorney General Bondi. Thank you for being here. And I wanted to thank you for your work at DOJ in restoring the rule of law, encouraging transparency surrounding Jack Smith's partisan investigations into President Trump, declassifying information about the Russia collusion hoax, cracking down on sanctuary jurisdictions, and establishing the National Fraud Enforcement Division. Let me first go to securing the border and immigration enforcement. Our new governor has recently rescinded 287G cooperation between the state and ICE. Can you talk about, have you evaluated the public safety impact, how that would affect safety in Virginia to withdraw that support and what that would do to criminal activity involving illegal immigrants in Virginia?
Yes, it would be detrimental, and as you know, Congressman, one of the top members of MS-13 in the entire country was living in Virginia, in a suburb, among all of us, living not even probably half an hour away from where we are now, and the cooperation previously with the governor, with the members of the state of Virginia, helped catch him and take him off our streets. An illegal MS-13, one of the heads for the entire country, was living in Virginia. And it's a shame that that's happening now. And thank you for talking about it, because we're going to keep America safe. And when people feel like they can flee to these cities and states and be safe, they can't. Because Donald Trump is going to protect Americans. We're going to protect the citizens there, whether or not the governors, the mayors are going to do it or not. But President Trump is. We're going to keep Americans safe from violent gang members like he's been doing this last year.
We appreciate that. We appreciate your work to make that happen in Virginia and keep Virginia safe. I want to move on to the Fraud Enforcement Division that you've established. My understanding is that this initiative is intended to centralize, coordinate enforcement of fraud laws related to government programs. You've talked about Minnesota, you've talked about California. Would this affect Virginia as well? Because we have fraud in Virginia as well.
Absolutely, and we look forward to working with you.
Would this affect things like long-term care accountability, senior living facilities engaged in Medicaid fraud, including systemic overbilling practices and the misappropriation of taxpayer-funded benefits?
That is exactly what it's set up to help.
Okay. I know that whether it was related to fraud specifically or another subject, that under the Biden administration, there was a sitting member of the Virginia General Assembly under investigation. Is that investigation still ongoing? Can you speak to that?
I can't discuss that.
Okay. I'm going to move on to the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding Americans. Last year, President Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Bill into law, which included the Hearing Protection Act, part of it that was sponsored by myself and Congressman Clyde. It reduced the national firearms tax, $200 tax on suppressors and short-barreled firearms to zero. And while the tax has been eliminated, the NFA's registration and paperwork requirements remain in effect, and your